Okay, so hello everyone. Today we'll be looking at how to answer taking perspective question. And if you heard just now, taking perspective question is actually 10 marks. So it requires a little bit more um, unpacking and understanding of the sources. So let's take a look at it. All right, so how do you do a 10-mark source-based question type? Okay, so I want you to refer to note 5, page 1. So there are about 5 steps for you to take note when you are looking at answering this 10-mark question. Okay, so the first thing is you need to read all sources, and it also includes actually the background information. All right, you will follow step 2, where you unpack and answer the question. You infer the sources. So basically, the 10-mark source-based question, it is really basically an inference question. All right, it just requires a little bit more thinking and connection, and you can get the 10 marks quite easily. All right. Now, step 3 is to identify source details, just like your inference, all right, and explain the source details. And this is the most important step. You must always ask yourself the so what, or we call it the link, or we even call it the larger outcome. All right. So from the source, answer the question, look at the source details that you've picked out, and ask yourself, what is the larger outcome? Okay, now a 10 mark means that you must look for at least a one yes source, that means a source that agrees with the statement, or a one no source, a source that disagrees with the statement, and you will get as high as 7 marks. Okay, so that means you need to do at least 4 sources, all right, to get the total 10 marks. All right, so let's take a look again. We're still at page 1. Okay, so the first step is to actually read the background information. And if you look at it, I actually highlighted in 2 colors. So you can actually highlight in 2 colors, the blue color as well as the orange color. Okay, so always take time to unpack your background information. And if you look at the blue color highlighted words, it actually tells you that healthcare in Singapore is made affordable. You can see that the question that they ask you, are healthcare facilities in Singapore sufficient? That means there will be sources that will say yes, it is sufficient. There'll be sources that says that no, it's not sufficient. We're going to unpack what is the meaning of sufficient in a bit. But the blue color actually means that healthcare is affordable. All right, and because of that, it has led to an increase in demand. And when we talked about increase in demand, that means something is lacking. There is a trade-off. All right. Now, because of the increase in the aging population, um, definitely the demand for healthcare facilities and manpower increase. It means there'll be more people who require the added um, facilities and the added manpower. That means they need to see the doctor or go to the hospitals more often. All right, and because of the increased in numbers, it has resulted in a shortage of doctors, nurses, or even facilities. So we talk about facilities later on. Okay, and the orange color highlighted and underlined words actually means that healthcare facilities, they're actually not enough. Now, step 2, we're still at page 1, but step 2, what you need to do is you need to unpack the question. All right, so highlight the healthcare facilities as well as the word sufficient. So what can we define as healthcare facilities? So some of the examples are hospital beds, wards, or even manpower such as medical staff. Okay, whereas what's the meaning of sufficient? It actually simply means is or are the healthcare facilities enough for everyone, enough for all? Okay, so as you read the background information, the second step is actually to unpack the question. Remember, you need to pick one yes source or one source that agrees with this statement and one no source. a source that disagree with this statement. So at the back of your mind, you would already have sort of prepared yourself as we are reading the sources. All right, so let's unpack and let's take a look at source A. Okay, we are at page 2 of note 5. All right, so source A is an extract from an article posted on Tan Tock Seng Hospital website in 2014. Okay, so it says that bed shortages are not new, so please underline the one in red. Okay, some of the extreme measures taken would have been rooftop gardens converted into wards or even beds placed along corridor. All right, and in 2006, the flu season has led to a massive influx. Influx actually means increased of patients suffering from pneumonia that filled all the beds. So that means these bed shortages are not new. So obviously, it actually means that the healthcare facilities is actually not enough. All right. So an example would be something like this: when you have, patients at makeshift areas of the hospital or in the corridors, or you can see that this particular image actually shows that the patients are really very close by, very near, so it's very cramped. So it actually does indicate that healthcare facilities actually is not enough. All right. So based on this source A, which you have already underlined, okay, so how do you answer the question? Okay, so go back to the question. How far do the sources, so we're just looking at source A now, how far does source A show that healthcare facilities in Singapore is sufficient? So answer the question first. All right, source A shows that healthcare facilities are insufficient. Answer the question. ATQ means answer the question. Okay, so what you do is copy the answers or the words or the sentences that are actually sort of highlighted in yellow. Now, after you have answered the question, all right, give the source details from the source, okay? Certain parts of, you don't have to copy everything from the source itself, but what exactly or what actually is the most important source details that you can zoom in to show that things are insufficient. So some of the most extreme measures taken in the past decade has been the rooftop gardens converted into wards and beds placed along corridors. So what does this particular source detail means? You explain the source details, all right? This suggests that healthcare facilities are just not enough for patients because you want to show that it is insufficient, right? And this is the one. So what? What is the larger outcome? All right. So hence, when there are not enough beds, what will happen to patients? Patients will not be able to get access to medical services. And if you don't get access to medical services, it would result in delayed treatment. And we all know that a delayed treatment will actually lead to a poorer health. Okay, so source A itself, when you answer the question, this is one paragraph itself. Okay, so the guide that is in blue, the ATQ source details, explain source details, the so what, the larger outcome. These are just ways to sort of help you, guide you in how to answer. Will you get them in the end of the year exam? No. So you have to roughly sort of remember how to answer this 10-mark question. Okay, and if you look really carefully, it is basically a simple inference question. All right, answer the question, source details, explain source details. The only added difference is definitely the so what, the larger outcome. All right, so we are going to the next source, which is on page 3. Now, it is a picture posted again on Tan Tock Seng's website, and it actually shows an office space in the hospital that is being used being used as an observation room for patients. Now, observation room actually means that before you actually get warded or before you actually get a bed in the hospital, you are placed there just to see the extent of how ill you are, what kind of treatment you need. And obviously, if you have people using office space, we can make the simple conclusion that healthcare facilities, they're just not enough, correct? And it actually tells you that there is some sort of like overcrowding here. There is some sort of a pandemic that's happening such that, the facilities are insufficient. Okay, so let's go back to the question. And when we look at the question, it actually says, all right, how far do source B just now in the case study show that healthcare facilities in Singapore is sufficient? All right, so obviously source B, I'm very sure you can answer the question straight away. It is insufficient. Okay, so please copy again the ones that is highlighted in yellow. All right, it is not inside your notes, so take a look at it. Okay, give the source details. Okay, from the source, it shows the office space being used as an observation room for patients at Tan Tock Seng. So sometimes when you have a picture like this, right, you can copy from the words or the sentences that is above the picture. We call that the provenance. All right, and explain the source details. So this suggests that basic facilities are not enough for patients. Right, insufficient, right? We're talking about insufficient. So what's the larger outcome? Okay, it's quite similar to source A. Okay, so when basic facilities such as a proper ward, a proper bed is not there, patients will not get treatment fast, as obviously there's overcrowding. And if you have to wait a very long time, especially in the observation area, it actually tells you that maybe they are understaffed. And if they are understaffed, then if you're just left untreated, a person or patient's condition could get worse and could worsen. And if that were to happen, then definitely there is a possibility of even death. All right, if you're not treated properly. So again, remember, this is just a simple inference question for that 10 marks. All right, answer the question, give the source details, explain the source details, but always remember, after you explain the source details, so what does having insufficient healthcare facilities mean? Right, it actually means that if you don't get the treatment fast, the condition of the patient could worsen. So that is the extra sort of link for you to make that connection. Okay, the source is telling you a little bit more, so make that connection to get your additional marks. Okay, so let's now go to source C. Okay, refer to note 5, page 4. All right, so source C is an article posted on Channel News Asia. All right, and it says here that there's a need for about 20,000 more healthcare professionals. Okay, and the health ministry is said to be on track. On track actually means that they are able to meet the numbers. Okay, this 20,000 healthcare professionals. We're talking about doctors, nurses, people who are in the industry of the medical profession. And it says here that there's about 9,000 more people entering, and it is already about half the target. Okay, and hospitals have been doing their part to attract and keep staff. Remember, we talk about overcrowding. Overcrowding could be the result of there is not enough people working in the hospital. And such an irony, in 2014, you can see the two source A and source B Tan Tock Seng Hospital seems to be overcrowding, right, and understaffed, right? But because this is December 2015, a year after all those things, the hospital has seen a 10% fall in resignation rate, and the very fact that now there are quite a solid or quite a good number of staff that is working. So it does show that healthcare facilities are enough. Agree? All right. So how do we then answer this question? So you can see that source A, source B disagree, but source C agrees with the statement. And what's the statement I'm talking about? This is the statement. All right, whether the healthcare facilities in Singapore is sufficient. And just answering the question, source C shows that the healthcare facilities are sufficient. In fact, from the source, it does tell you that the hospitals are doing their part. It does tell you that there's about 9,000 more healthcare professionals that's entering, which means that it will lead to more people working, and hospitals will not be understaffed. And when they are not understaffed, there will be a lesser wait time or queue. And what does this source detail suggest? So when you explain source details, it's more of a summary, it's more of a sum up. What do you understand given the source details? And it suggests that healthcare facilities, in terms of manpower, is enough, because you're talking about manpower, right? Talking about healthcare professionals. So what was the larger outcome? Hence, when there is enough manpower, patients' needs are met, correct? That means you are able to talk to the patient earlier, you're able to let the patient go into the wards, and the doctors can then treat the patients, and it will result in faster treatment. And I think in terms of their quality of life or the standard of living is definitely better. Because why? If you are sick, you go to hospital, you don't have to wait so long. There are professionals, there are medical staff to help you. You even get a ward, you get admitted really fast, and once you get into the ward, the doctors will treat you, and you can also discharge yourself from the hospital. So it is smoother, it is faster, because there's enough manpower. So source C is a source that agrees with the statement in saying that Singapore is sufficient in terms of providing healthcare facilities. So what do you do next is you do yourself the other sources. You look at sources D as well as sources E, sources D, okay, all right, as well as sources E, okay, and ask yourself about these two sources, and try to answer the question. Okay, so good luck.